Thank you for joining us in This Week in Turkey. I am Murat, Türsan. Tonight, we take a look at the remarkable rise of İYİ Party, dive into the Pandora Papers, cover protests in Boğaziçi University, and look at the inflation numbers. But before we do that, KONDA Research and Consultancy, a polling agency in Turkey, has come out with new polls on party popularity, and İYİ Party displays an impressive rise. According to KONDA, this week made history as the National Alliance. The alliance between CHP and İYİ Party is a favorite to defeat the People's Alliance, the alliance between AKP and MHP, the ruling parties, of course. Now, let's take a look at those polls.
Some of the most notable findings in KONDA's September Public Opinion Survey are as follows. The popularity rate for the Justice and Development Party, AKP, was 36.1% in July, dropped to 32.7% in September. When asked if the current president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, will win the next presidential election, 64% of the people surveyed responded no. While the Nationalist Movement Party's popularity fell to 8.9%, the total popularity for the People's Alliance between AKP and MHP dropped to 41.6%. Previously, the numbers for the People's Alliance had dropped to 46.5% in June and to 45.4% in July. In September, CHP's vote shares in the opposition bloc dropped to 24.8%, while the vote rate of the İYİ Party rose to 19.3%. While the CHP's popularity rate was 25.6% in July, the İYİ Party's popularity was at 15.7%. According to the new survey, CHP's popularity decreased by 0.8 points in September, while the İYİ Party is up by 3.6 points. Looking at the National Alliance, the total votes of CHP and İYİ Party in September increased by 2.8% to 44.1%.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the polls have it. For the first time, AKP and MHP are polling lower than the combined votes for CHP and İYİ Party. And one surprising finding from the polls, of course, is İYİ Party, a center-right secular nationalist party established only 4 years ago. Of course, İYİ Party cannot be mentioned without its founder and chair, Meral Akşener, who only 3 years ago managed to secure only 7% of the vote, but now is a presidential contender. We'll have Medyascope contributor Burak, Bilgehan, Özpek to comment on İYİ Party's recent gain in the polls. But before that, let's do a recap on İYİ Party and Meral Akşener.
65-year-old Meral Akşener began her political career in the 1990s and has always been aligned with the right-wing parties. Akşener, the former director of the women's branch of the True Path Party, was elected to the Turkish Grand National Assembly for the first time after the 1995 general election. She was appointed the Interior Minister in 1996 under the Prime Ministership of Necmettin Erbakan. Akşener also holds the title of being Turkey's first and only female Interior Minister to date. She was a vocal critic of the 1997 military intervention to Parliament, which pushed out religious conservatives from elected positions. Akşener resigned from the True Path Party in 2001 and joined the Virtue Party led by former AKP Prime Minister Abdullah Gül and Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Only 4 months later, she resigned again and joined the Nationalist Movement Party, noting that she was disappointed with the Virtue Party. She ran for mayor of Istanbul in 2004 but came back empty-handed, but was later elected as the deputy in 2007 and again in 2011. She served as the deputy speaker of the parliament for 2 terms. Akşener was nominated for the candidacy by the MHP in 2015, but was later removed from the candidate list during the 2015 elections. After MHP lost significant vote shares in the November elections, she requested a party convention. After a long judicial process, the court set a date for the extraordinary convention, but the MHP declared that it did not recognize this decision by the court. She was expelled from the party in September of 2016 and filed a lawsuit for wrongful dismissal, which was upheld by the court. She was staunchly against the constitutional reform proposed by the Prime Minister Erdogan, which eventually ushered him in as president after the 2017 referendum that transformed Turkey from a parliamentary republic to a presidential one. On October 25th of 2017, after the referendum, Akşener announced the formation of her new political party, İYİ Party. 199 other politicians were present in the founders' board of the party. A significant number of the ranks are made up of center-right, nationalist, and conservative parties.
Joining me now to comment on the matter, Burak, Bilgehan, Özpek. Mr. Özpek, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Mr. Özpek, I want to start off by asking you your thoughts about the recent meteoric rise of İYİ Party. Surely political winds in Turkey have been shifting for quite some time, but I don't think anyone expected İYİ Party to be rivaling CHP numbers. What do you think we owe this to? Your thoughts, please.
Actually, it's not surprising for me because for a while, İYİ Party was trying to be a centrist party. And you could notice the transformation of the language, transformation of the discourse, and the policies conducted by İYİ Party leadership. Actually, you are right to be shocked because it's a split party from nationalist party. And in the first 2 years of its life, İYİ Party speculated too much nationalist discourse based on national security. And this was a limitation for İYİ Party because this prevented İYİ Party to reach different segments of the society. But as of 2020, İYİ Party changed its discourse and policy and its communication style with the rest of the society and adopted a more centrist approach. Because for years, many scholars argued that there's a vacuum at the center of Turkish politics, and Akşener did notice this vacuum. And it's a very, tough business in Turkish politics because the framework of Turkish politics is demarcated by the government and its partners. So government wants the ongoing public debate to proceed on the basis of, national security, nationalism, conservatism. So it's hard to talk about economy. It's hard to talk about ecology. It's hard to talk about, other problems of the society. So what Akşener managed to achieve is, talking about the different aspects of the, economy, different aspects of the Turkish society's problems. That's what made İYİ Party a centrist party, actually. 1 year ago, when I argued that there is an attempt by Akşener towards the center of politics, people did think that this was a ridiculous idea. But for a year, everybody observed that Akşener diversified the issues, dealt with İYİ Party. And Akşener did, avoid using an emotional nationalist language. Akşener did, speculate different, issues such as environmental issues, economic issues, social issues. So this was not surprising for me because that was a very planned strategy which has been conducted for a year. And now, unsurprisingly, of course, by the help of the economic crisis that Turkey is experiencing nowadays, Akşener could attract especially right-wing voters who are not happy with the ongoing government.
I see, sir. Now, I believe you're insinuating that Akşener is stealing voter bloc from AKP and MHP, who are the right-wing parties in charge. Now, do you think this is a permanent shift towards İYİ Party, or do you think this is a momentary shift that AKP can reclaim? Now, as we know, the election is more than a year away, and more than a year away is a lifetime in politics. Anything can happen. But what are your thoughts? Is this a permanent shift or a temporary shift?
We have two conditions here. On the one hand, we have an agent, which is Akşener. So if Akşener continues to, play a centrist role in Turkish politics, this could be a permanent shift. On the other hand, we have another, condition, which is structure. It depends on the behaviors of the other actors in the political system. I think centrism could, compel other political parties to play more radical roles. For example, centrist İYİ Party could, push the AK Party and the MHP to a more radical role in Turkish politics, and this could help such a shift to be permanent in the next days. So, if AK Party competes with İYİ Party on the basis of centrist policies, this could limit or this could prevent İYİ Party to dominate the center of the politics. But if AK Party continues to behave like a radical marginal party, of course, this will be a permanent shift.
I see. And as we know, İYİ Party is an offshoot of MHP. Now, according to data, the combined votes for İYİ Party and MHP are now above MHP's popularity back in its heyday. Now, do you think we owe this to another rise in Turkish nationalism?
Yes and no. Because Turkish nationalism is not a concrete and is not a, tangible concept. Mm-hmm. You can find nationalism in every party. You can define CHP as a nationalist party. You can define AK Party as a nationalist party. It's a founding ideology of Turkish Republic, actually. You cannot deny the influence of nationalism over the political parties. So İYİ Party is a nationalist party, and that's not something rejected by the party elite. But they claim that they are defining nationalism in a different manner. For example, civic nationalism is very important for İYİ Party's ideology. Positive nationalism is very, fundamental for İYİ Party's ideology. Positive nationalism means that you have to compete with other nations on the basis of economy, on the basis of popular culture, on the basis of technology. That doesn't mean that, demonization of other nations is the only, premise of nationalism. So İYİ Party is trying to develop a different kind of definition of nationalism. So yes, it's a split party from nationalist party, but that doesn't mean that nationalist party and İYİ Party adopt the same kind of nationalism. There might be different interpretations of nationalism, and İYİ Party represents a new kind of nationalism in Turkish political spectrum. If you look at CHP, for example, you can find a different definition of nationalism in CHP. If you look at AK Party, you might find a different definition of nationalism. And still, you can find a different definition of nationalism in İYİ Party. So we cannot evaluate the İYİ Party's definition of nationalism by saying that this is a split party from, nationalist movement parties, so they are same, they are similar. So İYİ Party is not different from MHP. That's not true, because there are two other mottos. İYİ Party. İYİ Party is a nationalist party. İYİ Party is a Democrat party. İYİ Party is a developmentalist party. So pro-developmental strategies or pro-democracy strategies tell something about İYİ Party's understanding of nationalism. So it's different, I think.
I see. And I want to end with one thing. You had mentioned that İYİ Party has a different concept of nationalism than MHP or CHP. Now, what does this new concept of nationalism that is brought by İYİ Party hold for us? You've mentioned that, yes, that Turkey has to compete with the other countries and other economies in the world, but not necessarily be an isolationist. That appears rather contrary to AKP. Now, in this theoretical world, shall we say, if Meral Akşener does come to power, do you think that we will see a mending of European and U.S. relations with Turkey? Has she made any steps towards that?
A very good question. It depends on the profile of the people who will vote for İYİ Party. If you examine the profile of people who voted for İYİ Party and who are inclined to vote İYİ Party in the future, you could see that there are secular, there are urbanized, and there are middle-class people who have no reservation towards nationalism and who have no reservation towards democracy. So this is something, because this is something different than the profile of people who voted for MHP. They are urbanized. This means that they rely on their own labor and energy and, abilities. They are secular, which means that they are defining themselves with the help of secular concepts. So they are inclined to cooperate with European nations, European social groups, or Anglo-Saxon, societies. And they are urbanized. Urbanized means that they are very, they are very inclined to live with other lifestyles, other ideologies. This is what urban is, actually. So this is the profile of the voter base of İYİ Party. And I think this voter base, this profile will compel Akşener to cooperate with European Union and the Western world, because, the new generation is coming and they are going to dominate Turkish politics in the next years. And they want to see a Turkey as a part of the Western world. So Akşener will not resist this. Akşener will, lead this process instead of resisting westernization like other nationalist leader does nowadays.
I see. Mr. Özpek, thank you for your commentary and thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Pandora Papers. Billionaires are 7 times bitten, never shy. Pandora Papers is just another footnote in the long tradition of the wealthy moving their money offshore to avoid taxation and confiscation, and it doesn't look like anyone has been deterred by the previous leaks. If you'll remember, we've had the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, the Swiss Papers, the Bahama leaks, and a whole bunch more. But the cycle seems to continue. But while we're on the subject, we might as well report on a couple of Turkish nationals named in the Pandora Papers this week. This time, no Turkish politician currently holding office is being named so far, just a former one in a couple of companies. To remind our viewers, the former Prime Minister and Istanbul mayoral candidate Binali Yıldırım from AKP was named in the Paradise Papers. Now, let's take a look at who we have this time.
Turkish citizens and institutions began to surface in the Pandora Papers this week. One of the people named in the Pandora Papers is Nebahat Evyap İşbilen, one of the founders of the Medyascope Education Foundation, and the wife of former AKP Member of Parliament İlhan İşbilen, who is currently incarcerated for alleged ties to the Gulen community. Nebahat Evyap İşbilen transferred her assets from Turkey to the British Virgin Islands before an injunction was placed on the accounts in 2017. In the application made in April of 2017 for this transfer, it was revealed that these assets, which totaled $110 million, consisted of $35 million in cash and $75 million in bonds and promissory notes. Evyap Holding, formerly owned by Nebahat Evyap İşbilen, is known for being a family business that operates factories in Egypt, Malaysia, and Turkey, owns a private port, and had a net turnover at $830 million in 2019. İlhan İşbilen became a member of the board of directors for Evyap Holding by managing his wife's shares after their marriage. The famed Çalık Holding is also included in the Pandora Papers. The documents show 4 offshore companies based in the British Virgin Islands are affiliated with Çalık Holding, one of the fastest rising companies of the AKP era. These companies associated with Çalık Holding executives have millions of dollars on their books and are used for the holding's commercial transactions.
In other news, Boğaziçi protests are in their 8th month, and though they did slow down for a bit following the appointed rector Melih Bulu's dismissal, they are turning into clashes with the police one more time. Naci İnce, the former acting and current rector of Boğaziçi University, does not appear to want to give an inch, and the students at Boğaziçi seem to be paying dearly, but standing defiantly for it. Last night, 14 Boğaziçi students were detained by the police after protesters clashed with authorities as they attempted to march out of the school gates to read their demands. It was another jarring sight at Boğaziçi, as the students did not give in to the police attempting to block their march and prevent anyone from exiting the campus. Medyascope was on the scene.
Students attempting to protest the arrest of 2 students at Boğaziçi University were again blocked by police yesterday. 14 people were detained. While 10 of the detainees were released in the evening, reports indicate that 4 appeared in front of a judge this morning. After President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called the protesting students terrorists, 10 students were detained on October 5th and 2 of the students were arrested. Students were gathered in front of the university campus at noon to make a statement in protest of the arrests. At least 6 students were detained before the protests in front of the campus, where large numbers of police were waiting. Students gathered in the South Campus to march to the South Gates. The police units attempted to block the students from leaving the campus. Another group of students were detained in the ensuing clash with the police. After the protests on campus, university faculty marched to the gates and demanded that the students be released. The Istanbul governor's office announced that a total of 14 people were detained after the clashes. The governor's statement read, "Today at noon, a total of 14 suspects, 8 of whom not Boğaziçi University students, have been arrested, and a legal citation has been initiated against the group that gathered illegally in front of the south gate of Boğaziçi University by resisting the calls to disperse by the police department."
In the economy, the Turkish Statistical Institute has just released their latest numbers on inflation, and outlook not so good. Contrary to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's predictions, inflation did creep up just a tad over the central bank interest rates, a little over 0.5%. Famously, President Erdogan is a proponent of low interest rates to incentivize borrowing and to repair the economy. If you'll remember, we did a piece on personal debts in Turkey where we reported that 40% of the country uses 40% of their income to pay personal credit lines. This does not appear to faze President Erdogan, as he is again determined to reduce interest rates. Now, of course, a president doesn't typically take an active role in monetary bank policy, but this is only if you are not President Erdogan, because he appoints the heads of the central bank, and we are on our 7th central bank president now. Consequently, the lira took another hit last week, and the inflation is up again. Let's take a look at the numbers.
The Turkish Statistical Institute announced the inflation data for September of 2021. According to the data, the Consumer Price Index increased by 19.58% annually and 1.25% monthly. Producer Price Index rose by 43.96% year-to-date and 1.55% monthly. While the annual increase in food price inflation was 28.79% and the monthly increase was 0.50%, core inflation increased by 18.63% annually and 1.50% monthly. Annual inflation increased by 19.25% in consumer prices, 29% in food prices, and 45.52% in producer prices in August of 2021. The annual rate of increase in the core inflation was 18.46%. Though the Consumer Price Index increased by 19.25% in August, above the 19% policy rate of the central bank, the bank reduced the interest rate to 18% at the Monetary Policy Committee meeting on September 23 of 2021. Central Bank Governor Şahap Kavcıoğlu stated in various meetings that the consumer price inflation was due to high food price inflation, and said that they would focus on core inflation from now on, while core inflation, which was 18.46% in August, rose to 18.63% in September. Analyzing the annual CPI increase in September, food prices are in first place with 28.79%. Household goods take second place with 23.27%, while restaurants and hotels are in third place with the same rate. The increase in housing price inflation is in fourth place with 20.97%, and the increase in transportation prices inflation is in fifth place with 20.21%. In September of 2021, annual healthcare prices increased by 17.47%, and cost of education increased by 16.53%. The annual price increase in clothing and footwear was 7.32%. In September of 2021, the average price of 51 out of 415 items covered in the index decreased, while the average price of 46 remained unchanged, and the average price of 318 items saw an increase. The producer price inflation data yields a 43.68% annual increase in manufacturing, one of the four main sectors of the industry. In addition, the annual inflation increase in the mining and quarrying sector is 28.39%. The annual inflation increase in the electricity and gas production and distribution sector is 50.10%, and the annual inflation increase in the water supply sector is 30.15%. Meanwhile, the main industrial groups increased by 51.62% in intermediate goods, 29.25% in durable goods, 30.48% in non-durable consumer goods, 62.38% in energy, and 26.33% in capital goods.
That's it for us in This Week in Turkey. I have been Murat Türsan, and thank you.
Türkiye'nin sivil, bağımsız, özgür ve çoğulcu bir medya ortamına ihtiyacı var. Medyascope, 20 Ağustos 2015'te bu ihtiyacı karşılamak üzere yola çıktı. Ama yolumuz uzun. Bu yolculukta bize Patreon veya YouTube'un katıl butonu üzerinden katkıda bulunabilirsiniz. Destek verin, sizinle güçlenelim.